Yeah, absolutely. And on the flip side, we got some stuff from Russia.
Russia, Russia, Russia. Russia, Russia, Russia. Russia, Russia, Russia.
You know, the pandemic isn't the only thing that's happened since 1918. According to Bloomberg, Russia defaults on foreign debt for first time since 1918. And it's part of the sanctions and, let's just read. Russia defaulted on its foreign currency sovereign debt for the first time in a century, the culmination of ever tougher Western sanctions that shut down payment routes to overseas creditors. For months, the country found paths around the penalties imposed after the Kremlin's invasion of Ukraine. But at the end of the day on Sunday, the grace period on the about $100 million of snared interest payments due May 27 expired, a deadline considered an event of default if missed. It's a grim marker in the country's rapid transformation into an economic, financial, and political outcast.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah. So
Bloomberg, come on.
Yeah, well, it's Bloomberg, you know. So that's one aspect, the financial war, the economic war that the NATO West has placed upon Russia as sort of its tactic. Then we come to this here, which is a cyber pandemic in the making.
The COVID-19 crisis would be seen as a small disturbance in comparison to a major cyber pandemic.
And this is from
Can I
Reuters.
make a mention real quick about that, about the
default?
The default.
Yeah.
You know, something that's been very interesting to watch. Look, the ruble is more powerful than it's ever been. The ruble has rebounded. And if we had taken our own advice into getting our hands on some rubles.
Well, because they pegged it to gold, too.
We'd be billionaires right now.
Yeah.
So the ruble is doing fantastic. The sanctions have done nothing but bolster Russia's domestic industries and, you know, caused a huge boost in innovation economically and sort of industrially. And Bloomberg here, notorious, I mean, of course, it's owned by Bloomberg, the man himself, notorious sort of skeezy lizard person capitalist man.
Yeah.
I think what's happening with and why the attempt to make it sound like Russia is they basically make it sound like Russia's dead. Like, oh, they're not going to be able to participate in the global economy. So they're just dead. They might as well not be a country anymore. Look how effective our sanctions are. But I think there's another part of it, which is a revealing that Putin is so excited to take part in, which is we live in this, you know, globalized economy, liberal new world order after World War II, where we said, hey, okay, no, everybody stop fighting. Nobody kills each other anymore unless it's for oil. But we settle everything with money. Money means everything. War doesn't mean anything anymore. It's all about money. And I think Putin's stance on this is very interesting because it is a type of apocalypse, not sort of a biblical apocalypse, but apocalypse in the sense of a revealing. Because what Putin's doing is revealing, hey, you think that this liberal world order where everything is money and everybody just bows to capital, but I have a bunch of guns and millions of Russians who I can conscribe into an
what
army.
Are you, a white nationalist Republican? What are you talking about? Are you
I'm just saying. I think
but that's,
I'm talking.
yeah.
Philosophically.
No, I know.
And in a philosophical sense, he is revealing the fact that the world is still, the illusion of the economic liberal world order. It has been an illusory experience that the world has been in for 70 years. And Putin knows that he can just tear the Band-Aid off, tear the veil down and show everybody that, hey, I don't need to be a part of your system here. I can just get my guns and go do whatever I want. And that's why it is such a threat to everybody, because it's not a threat to any one nation necessarily. It's a threat to the system, the very philosophy, the principality that hovers over the globalized economy, liberal global economy. And to have that illusion broken is way more dangerous to the world order. I just mean in the sense of people will realize that they're not as safe as they thought they were. And that doesn't spell anything good for the people in charge.
Interesting you say that. Well, first off, the biblical apocalypse is also a revealing. It's a revealing of Jesus Christ.
Well, I was just trying.
But I know what you mean.
I wasn't trying to draw a straight line from this to Jesus returning.
Right. Putin is Jesus. You heard it here first. Basil says Putin is Jesus. No. So, to your point, let me just mention this Lithuania hit by cyber attack government agency thing, and then the real article that I wanted to dig into, which we're running out of time, is the next one. But let me just mention here that the Lithuanian state and private institutions were hit by a denial of service cyber attack on Monday. The Baltic country's National Cybersecurity Center said in a statement released by the Defense Ministry, quote, "It is very likely that attacks of similar or greater intensity will continue in the coming days, especially in the transportation, energy, and financial sectors." These centers said, which to your point, you just said how Russia's still the military, but Russia also is always blamed for cyber. They are very good and very much ahead in terms of cyber warfare. So something to keep in mind. Now that takes me to
and there's no defense against cyber warfare either. I mean, there is, but it's very hard.
It's much more nebulous.
Control. Very hard to control an effective actor in the cyber war realm.
Right. So the whole thing takes me to this study here on published on Al Jazeera. I know the outlet is, what it is.
It's a reliable outlet.
It's a good outlet. I'm just saying, there are biases inherent. But the headline here, Russia-NATO, 4 political variants under review. And this is a very long essay. It was written by Mohammed Chirakow, who I have here as a professor of conflict resolution and diplomacy at George Mason University in Washington, and Joanne bin Jassim Academy for Defense Studies in Doha. So, well-established guy here. I got some highlights.
Okay.
And says here, after the aftermath of the Ukraine war, as a protracted complex conflict has revealed how the Russia-West geopolitical rivalry has entered uncharted territories with an asymmetrical war and unparalleled weaponry. Hard power. Yeah, it's almost exactly what you're talking about.
Whoa, yeah, that's weird.
Hard power.
I didn't read this.
Yeah,
I didn't. You brought these stories.
I know. That's why there was a logical sort of landing spot for a lot of it. So, hard power versus sanctions and other tools of political economy, or sticky power. That's what you're talking about. Sticky power. It seems to be a misguided venture of power dynamics, bullets and rockets versus economic and financial warfare, perpetrating a long-herding stalemate for the stakeholders. That's why we're seeing all the stuff about the stakeholders.
I love how, we're conspiracy theorists for connecting this to the Great Reset. However, they just use the Great Reset language. I mean, they tell the truth. They just use the coded language.
Right. This paper addresses how the standoff between Putin's Russia and Western powers may amount to a new geopolitical paradigm shift and raises questions about the validity of certain conceptual frameworks, the renewal of the Cold War, the imposition of a new world order, and the imbalance of an assumed balance of power. And it's interesting because, let me just finish this paragraph and then highlights. These post-World War II mechanics of detente were prolonged. After detente, I had to look that. I didn't know what detente was, and I guess it just means like non-violent times, like non-conflict violent times. Détente. Okay, sorry. Yeah. After the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989 and the dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991 into the 21st century. Yeah, because the warfare changed to psychological mind control warfare through media and entertainment. That's largely why a lot of that stopped. But the post prefix endures the challenges of forecasting what would come after a 3-decade prolongation of several concepts, ushering to several unknowns of the Ukraine post-war game. War post game. And then it talks about the implied need for a tabula rasa or reconceptualization of alternative frameworks of international relations. Moreover, another puzzle has emerged. It is a 6th generation war if we consider the disparity of weapons. Russia's hard power and military tools versus the West sanctions. I already mentioned that. And then it goes into NATO, what NATO has. And let's see, the analysts, think tanks, and governments in both the West and the East can neither make a prophecy with certitude about the course of the open-ended Russia-NATO showdown, nor provide a scientifically based mechanism of eradicating coronavirus infections and containing their economic ramifications. So he's very critical of all of the world's policy making, which is very fascinating.
Yeah. And
then it talks about a complex meta conflict on the rise. And this is just a labyrinth of, I don't know. It goes through and tries to connect everything. We won't go through everything here, but here's a quote. He quotes Neil E. Harrison, who argues for the value of complexity theory in international relations. He says, quote, the public and military desire listen very carefully. The public and military desire the psychological comfort of discernible superiority. Media amplify internation conflicts, and the benefits of participation in the ideological mainstream preserve the distribution of power.
Oh, right there.
Yeah, right.
Read that part again.
Okay, so the public
back up like 8 words. Yeah.
And the benefits.
Yeah. Do the whole thing. Do the whole. This is beautiful. I gotta hear it again.
The public and military desire the psychological comfort of discernible superiority. Media amplify internation conflicts, and the benefits of participation in the ideological mainstream preserve the distribution of power and inhibit changes in the historic patterns that transform inevitable conflicts into costly rivalries.
If that does not precisely put into words the last, not only this conflict with just whatever, all the actors in the Russia-Ukraine conflict, it also perfectly describes the war on COVID.
Yes.
It perfectly describes the war on Trump. That describes, you could apply that to everything following the 2016 election.
Yeah.
Where it is all about the psychological comfort of being a part of the ideological mainstream.
Yeah, preserving the ideals that both sides think that their ideals are the proper ones.
Meaning we need it simple. It needs to be simple. It needs to be a good guy and a bad guy, and you can't. And that's why this show has such a complicated relationship with conservatives. Is during the Trump era, it was very difficult. It's hard to remember. That's the other part about it. Tabula rasa was mentioned.
Yeah.
In this article, where a lot of times, and I think it's designed and I think it's perpetrated on people, on the public as a whole, that they cannot actually remember what it was like, whatever, a year ago, 2 years ago. You cannot remember, everybody. Anti-vaxxers was an example. That might not be the most prescient example in this context, but anti-vaxxers is an interesting example because anti-vaxxers before COVID was really an entirely different thing than anti-vaxxers after COVID. However, almost nobody remembers what anti-vaxxers were like before COVID. And it's, you can apply that to all sorts of different things. So there is this sort of like Men in Black mind erase thing whenever the new lines are drawn as far as the ideological mainstream is concerned. So this is really powerful. Yeah. Thank you for bringing this.
Yeah. There's a lot more here. There's quotes of Nobel Peace Prize nominee Johann Galtung, who explains the conflict as a social system of actors and and he talks about the meta conflict over Ukraine accentuates this notion of the system and the overall incompatibility between competing political and economic structures. So there you go. And then third, the Ukraine war also represents a meta conflict that has been managed by narratives. Oh, this is the part I wanted to really bring you, Basil, because this is nice here. This is interesting. The Ukraine war also represents a meta conflict that has been managed by narratives and discourses either at the Kremlin, NATO headquarters, the White House, or the United Nations Security Council. Narrative analysis theorist Sarah Cobb.
Like us?
Narrative analyst theorist. I think I think we have a
she's
title.
A colleague of ours.
Yeah, we need to reach out to Sarah Cobb and say, hey, put us on that list of narrative analysis theorists.
Totally. And that is, my gosh, you're right. This is incredible. Al Jazeera, by the way, this is the Al Jazeera Center for Studies, not necessarily their news outlet, but it is like
their research
an academic research firm. Yeah, research outlet. And yeah, that perfectly describes what I feel like I'm trying to say all the time. And whether it's on the show or talking with people in real life, when I say, the corporate media are literally crafting the worldview. They are crafting a worldview, which means they are crafting reality in a way, reality, not objective reality, not big T truth, big R reality, but reality as far as any individual could possibly discern. When you have a population who relies on one industry, the corporate news industry, to tell them what is real, their job then becomes storytellers. And in this case, in this mass media case, a storyteller literally becomes a crafter of reality. Mm-hmm. And this, narrative is another word we use for it. So when I say that the corporate news media are like literal wizards,
they are
that are creating reality for quite literally billions of people base their idea of reality.
Perceptions. Yeah, they're shaping the perceptions of the public, which becomes reality. Yeah.
Right. It's right here. Apparently, there's an entire job title for somebody who sees that and spends their time trying to deconstruct the narrative.
I would love
it's just very powerful. I hope people are understanding that.
Yeah, I would love to interview Sarah Cobb here. Listen to her quote.
Yeah.
Quote, the discursive process in which people struggle for legitimacy, caught in stories they did not make by themselves, and all too often cannot change. The network of social relationships, histories, and institutional processes restrict the nature of stories that can be told. Conflict, from this perspective, is a narrative process in which the creation, reproduction, and transformation of meaning itself is a political process. A struggle against marginalization and delegitimization for legitimacy is not hegemony. Narratives matter. Like, whoa, you just summarized our whole show. That's
the whole point. This show exists. That is crazy.
Interview this lady.
Well, this is great. We do need to interview this lady. We also need to keep this show moving.
I know. There's so much more in here.
I know.
We might need to come back to it later.
Yeah. We might need to make it a segment. We'll have an education segment where we break down this, like the whole school of thought, the whole theory of study here. I think deserves to be returned to on a regular basis.
Yeah,
because it's nice to know that there is an entire academic field we're basically dilettantes flapping around in an academic field that has some very serious study behind it, and makes me feel just slightly less crazy.
Yes.
So let's keep studying this, and we'll bring it back in further shows. Sure. And I trust everybody is excited about this as we are.
Just to end this segment, there is a section titled in this essay, New World Order. Yeah, for good measure.
Yeah.
So
we got to talk to this Sarah Cobb person.
Yeah.
All right. Well, good.